Let's start by giving our praises to the Most High, whose true name in Hebrew is Yahweh, in the name of His only begotten Son, whose true name in Hebrew is Yahweh Shai, and the Holy Spirit, which is the Rakah Kodash. Double honors to the elders and apostles and the Holy Spirit, who taught us His truth. Honors to the brethren doing the work to push the gospel, risking their life and freedom to do so. Peace and blessings to the hopeful elect, which should be the true Israelites, the Negroes, Latinos, Native Americans, and Seminole Indians, and 1/3 of these people who will receive salvation by returning back to the Most High. So, we back with another lesson through the power and spirit of Yahweh Bahashim Yahweh Shah. This lesson is going to be Remember the Help from Heaven, number 5. It's going to be titled Let Fire Come Down from Heaven, if I be a man of God. And these lessons is to help us remember the help that we receive from the Most High. So this is Romans 15:4. For whatsoever things are written aforetime were written for our learning, that we, through patience and comfort of the scriptures, might have hope. So everything written in this book is more than just an ancient book, but it's written for our learning today, thousands of years later. And how do you learn what's written? It's through reading. So you actually got to read the scriptures. And you can read how certain of our ancestors was delivered from these different situations. 1 Corinthians 10:1. Moreover, brethren, I would not that ye should be ignorant how that all our fathers were under the cloud, and all passed through the sea, and were all baptized unto Moses in the cloud and in the sea. So what Paul is telling the scattered Israelites is that, hey, my fathers, your fathers, hey, they all passed under that cloud. And that cloud would be what the world calls a UFO, the chariots of the Most High, the chariots of fire. And being under that chariot, that was us being under the shadow of the Almighty. Let's hit that in Psalm 91. He that dwelleth in the secret place of the Most High shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty. Because being under that cloud, we was what? Under the shadow of the Almighty. Because the cloud does what? It casts a shadow over you. And that shadow symbolizes what? The Lord's protection. The book of Exodus wasn't the only time that our ancestors passed under the cloud, under the chariot, what the world calls a UFO. Another account of that would be dealing with Elijah. This is 2 Kings chapter 1, verse 7. And he said unto them, what manner of man was he which came up to meet you and told you these words? And they answered him, he was a hairy man, and girt with a girdle of leather about his loins. And he said, it is Elijah the Tishbite. Then the king sent unto him a captain of 50 with his 50. And he went up to him, and behold, he sat on top of the hill. So yeah, the king was upset at Elijah and sent a small army after him. But Elijah was on the hill, and he sat on top of the hill, and he spake unto him, thou man of God, the king hath said, come down. So they wanted Elijah to come down so that they could bring Elijah to the king. And Elijah answered and said to the captain of 50, if I be a man of God, then let fire come down from heaven. So they were questioning, was this really a man of the Lord? But what did Elijah say? If I be a man of the Lord, then let fire come down from heaven and consume thee and thy 50. And there's really no telling what they was going to do to Elijah. Take him, beat him, kill him, lock him up. And there came down fire from heaven and consumed him and his 50. Again, also he sent unto him another captain of 50 with his 50, another small army. And he answered and said unto him, O man of God, thus hath the king said, come down quickly. And Elijah answered and said unto them, if I be a man of God, let fire come down from heaven and consume thee and thy 50. And the fire of God came down from heaven and consumed him and his 50. Yeah, and where do you think this fire came from? The fire, you know, didn't just randomly come out the sky. No, the fire came from a source. Of course, the source would be the Most High, but that fire actually came from a chariot. Because what did we get in Psalms 91? He that dwelleth in the secret place of the Most High, that's having this understanding, that's being in this truth, having the Holy Spirit, shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty. Wasn't Elijah a prophet? So didn't Elijah dwell in the secret place of the Most High? Therefore, he was under the shadow of the Most High. And was being under the shadow of the Most High? What did Paul tell our people that were scattered? Be not ignorant how that all our fathers were passed under the cloud. So Elijah was under the same cloud that Moses and the Israelites was under coming out of Egypt. That's where that fire from heaven came from. That fire came from that cloud, that chariot, what the world calls a UFO. Elijah, obviously needed help. No telling what was about to happen to him. The prophets were always persecuted for the words of the Most High that they carried. And what? The Lord sent fire from heaven to consume these men by the 50s. And he sent again a captain of the third 50 with his 50, and the third captain of 50 went up and came and fell on his knees before Elijah and besought him, and said unto him, O man of God, I pray thee, let my life and the life of these 50 thy servants be precious in thy sight. Behold, there came fire down from heaven and burnt up the two captains of the former 50s with their 50s. Therefore, let my life now be precious in thy sight. So the next 50 with his captain, the third set, went to Elijah. They was in fear because they done probably heard, by word of mouth what happened to the previous 50 and the 50 before them. They was burnt up. Now a Christian would think again that just a random forest fire came out of heaven. A Christian would think that a random forest fire just magically came out the sky. No, this was intentional, and the fire had a source, and that fire would have been from a chariot, what the world calls a UFO, which this wasn't a regular fire. This was that concentrated fire, what the world calls laser beams. So the Lord started zapping these folks by the 50s, to help Elijah. And the angel of the Lord said unto Elijah, go down with him. What was the angel talking from? Talking from that cloud, the chariot. Be not afraid of him. And he arose and went down with him unto the king. But see, again, the fire didn't just magically come from the sky. The fire came from the cloud, came from the chariot. Why? Because Elijah abode under the shadow of the Almighty. Meaning what? That he had a chariot overhead. A chariot, aka a cloud. That cloud being a so-called UFO. And guess what? Just as our ancestors that came out the land of Egypt, just as Elijah, if we dwell in this same secret place, meaning if we of the elect, guess what? We abide under that same shadow, under that same cloud. And guess what? Just like that fire came down and consumed, the men who was after Elijah, hey, best believe it can happen again for us in this lifetime. And then when we jump forward to the book of Luke chapter 9, we're going to start at verse 51. And it came to pass when the time was come that he should be received up, he steadfastly set his face to go to Jerusalem and sent messengers before his face. So Yahushua sent messengers, before his coming. And they went and entered into a village of the Samaritans to make ready for him. And they did not receive him because his face was as though he will go to Jerusalem. And when his disciples, James and John, saw this, they said, Lord, wilt thou that we command fire to come down from heaven and consume them, even as Elijah did? And how did James and John and the disciples know that they could command fire to come down from heaven? Well, they had knowledge of the scriptures. Romans 15:4. For whatsoever things were written aforetime were written for our learning. So, reading the scriptures, knowing the scriptures, James and John knew that it was actually a possibility to call down fire from heaven. So they had the scriptures, in the days of the New Testament. What was they reading? The Old Testament. Because how did they, in the book of Luke, know about the fire that came down from heaven? Because they was reading the Old Testament. They read 2 Kings. They read all that. So that's why the things written aforetime was written for our learning. And then what? Knowing the scriptures, being fully persuaded, we will be comforted, that we may have patience, and that we may have hope. We're going to come back to this hope. But now we see that James and John and the disciples had knowledge of Elijah commanding fires to come down from heaven. And Yahushua pretty much told them no. But when we come to the book of 1 John 5:14, and this is the confidence that we have in him, that if we ask by anything according to his will, he heareth us. So if we ask and it lines up with the will of the Heavenly Father, it will come to pass. If we know that he hear us, whatsoever we ask, we know that we have the petitions that we desired of him. So the Lord is going to grant us whatever we ask if it lines up with his will, concerning his elect. And that's important to know, because we must know that the Lord is coming with his chariots like a whirlwind, and his rebukes a flame of fire. By the fire and by his sword will he plead with all flesh. So what? If we ask the Lord today, in this generation, to send down fire from heaven to consume people, it will happen. And it's going to happen. Because what did verse 14 say? And this is a confidence that we have in him. So we know what the words say. So if we ask, and it's according to the word, have confidence that it will happen. And why is that important, to have confidence in knowing that we can call down fire from heaven? Because Isaiah 59:19, so shall they fear the name of the Lord from the west in America, and his glory from the rising of the sun, when the enemy shall come in like a flood. What's the enemy coming in like a flood? Them locking down the streets of America through martial law. And when you think about a flood, it comes in waves. And how is the flood going to come in waves? How's the enemy going to come in like a flood? Well, Esau might hit your block. He may send killer drones with flamethrowers, that can shoot bullets at you, that can throw smoke bombs, flash grenades, etc. And then he may send mechanical dogs with flamethrowers attached to them, AR-15 guns, automatic weapons. Then he might send his foot soldiers. Then he might send some killer robots. Then he may come with airstrikes, etc. That's the enemy coming in like a flood. And the flood, it gets everywhere. So that's how Esau gonna come in with him, his weaponry, his technology, and his robotics. He's gonna come in like a flood. But guess what? The Spirit of the Lord shall lift up a standard against him. And then when we get this standard in the Blue Letter Bible,
Strong's H 5127. Noose. Strong's H 5127. Noose. Noose.
So I had to play twice just to show that we're looking at the same word. The Lord shall lift up a standard against him. So what? The Lord's lifting up a standard. The result is that we're going to escape. That we're actually going to be able to flee the danger. We're going to flee from the enemy coming in like a flood. So escape is the result. What was going to lead to our escape is going to take form in many different ways. It says to take flight. Hey, so some members of the elect, hey, they might take flight. They may literally fly or be teleported. That's a future lesson. It says to disappear. So the Lord may cloak, some of us. Because remember, we're under the shadow of the Almighty. Now, if we're under the shadow of the Almighty, literal and metaphorical is no limit what the Lord can do for us. It says to put to flight. So brothers going to get powers to put their enemies to flight. That's why the Lord said, one shall chase 1,000. To cause to disappear, to hide, to drive hastily. So yeah, the Lord's going to lift up a standard that we may escape. And, from the scope of the lesson, we talk about how Elijah called fire down from heaven to consume the king's army by the 50s. And that what? James and John had knowledge of that, and they actually thought, hey, it's a possibility we could call fire down from heaven as well. That's like Romans 15:4. It says that through patience and comfort of the scriptures might have hope. So when you surrounded by UN troops, military police, mechanical dogs, killer drones, those who don't have knowledge of the scriptures, they're going to lose all hope. But what? Because we know what's in the scriptures, we know what the Lord's done before, we know what to have hope in. Because see, those outside of this understanding, they're not going to consider the possibility that they can call fire down from heaven to consume Esau and his UN troops. They're not going to consider that they can call fire down from heaven and burn up his tanks, his MRAPs, his military vehicles, to blast their killer drones out the sky, helicopters. They're not going to consider that. And see, that's where our hope lies. Our hope lies in what the world would not consider. So yeah, the things we hope for, the rest of the world won't consider. And this won't be the first time that the Lord fought for us or defended us from the face of our enemies. Like one of the earliest accounts, it will be in the book of Exodus. Now let's show that real quick. And the children of Israel went into the midst of the sea upon a dry ground. This is after Moses split the sea. And the waters were a wall unto them on their right hand and on their left. And the Egyptians pursued and went in after them in the midst of the sea, even all Pharaoh's horses, his chariots, and his horsemen. So that what? That would be the military, the armies of Pharaoh. So Pharaoh did what? When the enemy shall come in like a flood, the Spirit of the Lord shall lift up a standard against him. So Pharaoh, his chariots, and his horsemen, they pursued the children of Israel like a flood in the midst of the sea. Pharaoh and his armies, was all over the damn place. And that's what Esau gonna do. They're gonna chase us like a flood. All right, so, and the Egyptians pursued and went in after them to the midst of the sea, even all Pharaoh's horses, his chariots, and his horsemen. And it came to pass that in the morning watch, the Lord looked unto the host of the Egyptians through the pillar of a fire and of the cloud. And that cloud will be what? Psalms 104:3. Who maketh the clouds his chariot. Take this word cloud, replace it with chariot. Now let's go back to the precept. And it came to pass in the morning watch, the Lord looked unto the host of the Egyptians through the pillar of fire and of the chariot. He maketh the cloud his chariot and troubled the host of the Egyptians. So the Lord troubled them. Let's see how that played out. And took off their chariot wheels, that they drave them heavily, so that the Egyptians said, let us flee from the face of Israel. For the Lord fighteth for them against the Egyptians. So even during the first Exodus, the Lord, through the cloud, that cloud being what? The chariot, it fought for the children of Israel. Because remember, the children of Israel was literally under that cloud, under that chariot. And the Lord did what? He got the zapping them. That's fire coming down from heaven. Where you think the fire came from? It came from the chariot. It didn't manifest itself. No, something commanded it. The fire coming down was commanded to come down when Elijah called for it. And it devoured the armies of 50. The fire that's zapping Pharaoh and his chariots was commanded to zap them. The fire didn't come from itself. It was intentional. So what? Pharaoh and his armies came in like a flood against the children of Israel, who's modern day Pharaoh. Esau, Edom, the so-called white man, because this is modern day Egypt. That's why the pyramid's on the back of the dollar. And just as Pharaoh pursued the children of Israel during the first Exodus, well, during our second Exodus coming out of America, we're going to be pursued by Pharaoh again. Pharaoh, in this lifetime, will be Esau, Edom, the so-called white man. So Esau, his UN troops, his military police, his illegal immigrants that's going to be given the badge, killer drones, helicopters, his Air Force, mechanical dogs, they're going to come after us. And the Lord going to lift up that standard. And what? That's going to play out in many different shapes and forms. But it's going to be instances where these chariots get the zapping Esau and his weaponry. Get the zapping them. Just like he did in ancient Egypt. And why is the Lord going to zap them? Well, he's going to lift up a standard, for those who dwell in the secret place of the Most High. Those who will pretty much be the elect. Why? Because we're under the shadow, the protection of the Almighty. And being under the shadow, under the protection of the Almighty is going to manifest into this physical world till where brothers is going to pass under the cloud again. The cloud being a chariot. So having what the world calls a UFO, literally flying overhead, watching over you. You literally being under a literal shadow of the Almighty. In that shadow, that cloud, that chariot, that UFO, hey, you can have confidence in calling fire down from heaven. Because remember, 1 John 5:14, and this is a confidence that we have in him, that if we ask him anything according to his will, he heareth us. And how do we know that it's his will to send fire from heaven when we call for it? Because it said the enemy will come in like a flood, the Lord shall lift up a standard. A standard being what? That we may escape. That we may put our enemies to flight. And what? The Lord fought for us again. Or the Lord fought for us before. Because remember, let us flee from the face of Israel, for the Lord fighteth for them against the Egyptians. Well, the Lord gonna fight for us against you Americans, which are modern day Egyptians. So yeah, it's the Lord's will to send fire from heaven again when his elect men call for it. So back to 2 Maccabees chapter 15, verse 7. But Maccabees had ever sure confidence that the Lord will help him. So yeah, we commanded to have that same confidence because we asking something of him that's in his will. Wherefore he exhorted his people not to fear the coming of the heathen against them. Ain't the heathen coming against us again? Then the Lord tell us what? In Isaiah 59:19, when the enemy shall come in like a flood, that's a heathen coming after us. That what? The Lord will lift up a standard against them. So yeah, we commanding the people now. Don't fear the coming of the heathen. Don't fear Esau, his UN troops, his technology, and his weaponry, his military. But to remember the help which in former times they had received from heaven. So remember when Elijah called fire down from heaven to devour the armies of the king of Samaria. Remember when James and John asked Yahushua, should we command fire to come down from heaven like Elijah did? Remember how the Lord, through the pillar of cloud and fire, being that chariot, started to fight against Pharaoh and his armies, started zapping them, etc. Remember that and expect it to happen, because we got to get the victory. And that victory is only going to come from the aid, from the help that we're going to get from the Almighty. And so now we to be comforted, reading out the law and the prophets just as they did. Because the things written aforetime was written for our learning, that we may be comforted and have hope. Now we know what to have hope in. So if you find yourself surrounded, even you sisters, I pray to the Lord that he send fire from heaven and burn up the enemy. And expect it to happen and be confident when you ask for it. And that's why when we hit the book of Ecclesiastes, chapter 1, verse 10, is there anything whereof it may be said, see, this is new? So when the rest of the world, Esau and his army, start seeing these chariots tearing up folks, zapping them, zapping their military vehicles, zapping their military equipment, it's going to be a new thing to them. It's new to this generation, but it's not new to the earth. It had been already of old time, which was before us. So the Lord been having the cloud pass over our ancestors. The earliest recording was probably when the Israelites came out of Egypt. Another one would be when Elijah was calling fire down from heaven. How did the fire come down from heaven? Because the chariot was right there over Elijah. And that same chariot was over Yahushua, James, and his disciple as well. Well, guess what? That same chariot going to be over the elect. Many chariots going to be over the elect. They have already been of old time, which was before us, so it's nothing new. It's just new to these people. And those on the outside, they're going to have no clue what's going on. But that's why the scriptures say, then they shall know who are my chosen. Verse 9, the thing that had been is that which shall be. Our people passed under the cloud before, they're going to pass under the cloud again. Certain of our ancestors commanded fire to come down from heaven, and it happened, and it's going to happen again. That which is done is that which shall be done. The Lord fought for us before and zapped at our enemies. The Lord going to fight for us and zap at our enemies again. And there is no new thing under the sun. We got the victory before, we got the victory again. So yeah, have confidence in calling fire down from heaven. Hey, when you need it most, if you were the elect, it's going to happen. And when James and John tried to do it in the book of Luke, that was pretty much, it pretty much went the right time. There's pretty much not making proper use of it, but abusing it. So it lines up with the Lord's will, and you were the elect, and you got the power to call down fire from heaven, and that's what's going to happen. Till next time, Shalom.